Hello everyone, my name is Cristina Galvez and I will present my work, Using Poetry as Extensive Reading in E-Literary Circles, a proposal for EFL teaching through workshops, especially the chapter related to methodology. This is the table of contents: 1. The problem, 2. Theoretical framework, 3. Methodology, and 4. Final thoughts. The problem. Characteristics and advantage of literary circles. Literary circles are very similar to book clubs, although there are a few important differences. However, in both cases they are small groups of people who share readings, often driven by the pleasure of reading itself, and by sharing this interest with others. Participants read the same texts individually and meet to discuss, compare, and share their perceptions and points of view. Within EFL teaching, literary circles have been an effective strategy for the development of skills. Not only reading skills are exercised, but also speaking through discussions carried after the reading. Extensive reading involves reading from a position of enjoyment, and this, combined with interesting discussions in a collaborative environment, as it is done in this type of dynamics, not only gradually familiarizes learners with new aspects of the language, but has also proven to imply motivation. Literary circles enhance collaborative learning and the joint construction of reflection and knowledge. Our proposal: poetry in literary circles. Reading poetry allows an intimate and emotional connection with the text, which can be a great advantage when learning a second language, by making students engage at such levels with the proposed material. On the other hand, the lexical, syntactic, and register variety that poetry offers translates into a deeper familiarization of the students with the language. We propose extensive reading of poetry within literary circles workshops that we aim to conduct online. The questions that guide our project are: is it feasible to offer these workshops within virtual environments? What specific aspects should we consider for that matter and for the overall methodology? What methodological characteristics could the reading of poetry in literary circles imply as a means of developing skills such as critical reading, cultural awareness, in addition to reading and speaking? And how are these instances experienced by learners? It is important to note that although we are parting from these questions for our project, these questions won't determine our investigation. Therefore, we are open to new knowledge that could arise during the research project. Our objectives are: general objective, to design a course or series of workshops using extensive reading of poetry within a literary circle dynamic in TFL. Specific objectives: 1. To propose a methodology as well as specific materials and activities to carry the aforementioned program. 2. To discuss the impact of literary circles methodology in the developing of reading and speaking skills, as well as in critical reading and cultural awareness. To analyze the response of learners to extensive reading of poetry in learning English as a second language. Theoretical framework. Within the conceptions that we consider important for our study are literary circles and extensive reading, which we already defined in general terms; collaborative learning, that, as its name says, include methodologies of learning in which knowledge is constructed through interaction with peers; and virtual environments of learning within an online modality, considering the necessary tools and other aspects that might be necessary for these types of program. We also consider important the terms of affective barriers, motivation, critical thinking, and cultural awareness, but we will not stop in their definitions at this moment. Previous studies in the field. These studies were mentioned in our previous work presented in Seminar 2. We will only mention them right now. En Venezuela, influencia de la lectura extensiva en la actitud y comprensión crítica de los estudiantes de inglés como lengua extranjera, el texto y el contexto en la comprensión de la lectura de inglés para fines específicos, influencia del uso de la metacognición en las inferencias en la lectura para fines académicos. And at a global level, the following articles. Círculos literarios, el poder de la lectura en el desarrollo de competencias, una propuesta metodológica para el uso de la poesía en el aula de inglés como lengua extranjera, y la poesía y el mejoramiento de la competencia comunicativa en inglés. Methodology. It is proposed that within the project methodology there will be two key moments. The first for the design of the course, especially the pilot workshop, and the second for its implementation and evaluation. At this last moment, the collection and subsequent analysis of data will be carried out. Regarding the first stage of the project, that is, the design of the workshop, the methodology will be limited to secondary investigation, in which sources, materials, and projects around similar experience will be consulted. Similarly, research will be done to establish the learning context in which the program will be taught. This first phase involves extensive documentation as well as an assessment of a possible target group of participants and research around similar courses currently offered both in online and face-to-face modalities. For the entire course, that includes 3 workshops, we will only design in detail and implement one of them. This pilot workshop will consist of the reading of selected texts of the North American poet Mary Oliver and will be appropriate to students of a B1 level at least. From the poetic work of the author, we will choose texts that, due to their simplicity, allow fluid reading, but that also represent a challenge and a learning opportunity for participants. During the development of the pilot workshop, we will begin with the collection of data for this second phase. Both data collection and analysis will be primarily qualitative. As a first source for data collection, the researcher will keep a research journal. Once the workshop is over, an instrument will be applied to the participants in the form of an open-ended questionnaire, which will elicit responses about their experience in the workshop. Once again, we are open to new information and knowledge that may arise in the research process. The questions of the instrument will be divided into sections in which interrelated aspects will be measured. For example, the first section might include questions about motivation and affective barriers and how the participants experience this in terms of the learning process. The second section will include questions related to the development of reading and writing skills, as well as critical thinking and cultural awareness. The students will evaluate their own experience and will be able to consider if the practice of these skills within the workshop had a positive impact on their learning. And the third section might address the evaluation of collaborative learning, that is, how the dynamics of working with peers and the joint construction of reflection impacted their learning experience. It's important to note that all of these will be directed to the self-evaluation of learners of their own experience. We do not aim to prove with evidences or establish if indeed affective barriers were lower or motivation increased, for example, but to reflect the subjectivity of the learners in terms of their experience. Being this a qualitative research project, both in terms of data collection and analysis, the information will be handled verbally, exposing the results obtained and the reflective process to reach conclusions from them, taking into account that, as Thorney states, Qualitative data analysis is inherently language-based analysis. However, we do intend to carry out certain formalized analytical procedures. That is, we will order and code the data obtained for its display and for its posterior analysis. Table 1 summarizes the two phases of the research mentioned, the specific objectives to which they respond, and the methodology and most relevant aspects in terms of data collection and data analysis. Likewise, the table indicates a third phase that corresponds to the last moment of the project, in which the design and implementation of the pilot workshop will be assessed. Regarding the administrative aspects, the main resources to take into account are the time for both of the phases, as well as the context in which the workshop will be developed, which is still to be defined and might be one of the difficulties on our study. Regarding the time resource, we present a Gantt diagram in which we order the activities to be carried out chronologically. As we can see, as part of the Phase 1 course design, we have planning, secondary research, design of general course and pilot workshop, establishing context and participants for workshop. For the Stage 2 pilot workshop, we have implementation of pilot workshop, data collection and data analysis on the research journal. And for a final stage of assessment, we have more data collection on the open-ended questionnaire and general data analysis and completion of the project. This Gantt diagram includes the fifth and sixth period of the master's program. Final thoughts. Literary circles are instances that can bring together different kinds of people with a common interest in reading. Extensive reading implies the seeking of enjoyment, aesthetic pleasure, reflection, and the opportunity to delve into different topics. Poetry appeals to the dimension of imagination and emotions, which allows a much more intimate relationship with the text. We aim to propose a different learning experience in which other kinds of ways of relating are possible, and learners exercise their sensitivity, both toward their peers and the relations they might establish, and towards the text to be read. These are the references we use for our written work. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to contact me.